Hello everyone, this is going to be a tier list similar to the one that I've already made, but this one is specifically going to be targeted at lower MMRs. More specifically, gold and below is the elo range that I'm trying to target with this tier list. But hopefully you guys enjoy, and if you do enjoy, please don't forget to subscribe, it helps me out a lot. And also leave a comment saying what you think about the tier list, and if I forget any champions, do let me know. Ahri at lower MMRs, I think Ahri probably very similar to at higher MMRs. She probably does just go into the A tier. She's quite straightforward to play as long as you can get a decent grasp on what she needs to do. She's not super good at lower MMRs, mostly just because her ult can be quite complicated to use properly, but she has a lot of depth to her, I suppose, but her skill floor is quite high in my opinion. Akali at lower MMRs, I'd probably place in B tier as well. She's very hard to make work. She requires you to be able to use her passive properly. She requires you to be able to use her ult properly. And I just don't think the lower MMR people can do that properly. However, she's also very easy to get to a stage where she's broken because lower MMR players are not good at punishing laning phases. Akshan at lower levels, he's D tier to be honest. I don't think he's gonna do very well because he's hard and he's very unique. He's very strong in lane, but I don't think lower MMR players can do that properly. Like, can punish the laning phase properly. Anivia? I think Anivia is situationally broken, much like in the tier list that I made on higher MMRs. I think Anivia at lower levels can work very well as well because she doesn't really interact with the enemy laner and it's very straightforward how to play her. Once you get after level 6, there's not too much you have to think about. You can just one-shot the wave and move on, which means that against the proper team composition, against melee champions, Anivia can be very good. Annie. Annie at lower MMRs is extremely, extremely good. She's very simple as a champion. She's an absolute team fighting menace. She's very easy to pilot in laning phase mechanically, and it's very straightforward what she wants to do, so that makes her an S tier pick at lower MMRs. Aurelion Sol. I think he's an S tier pick at lower MMRs as well. Mostly because players cannot punish his laning phase properly. If you learn how to play Aurelion Sol to a decent degree, and you learn how to make sure you don't lose laning phase too hard, and you learn how to make sure that you can trade with the enemy laner once they waste their cooldowns, and you can try to bait them out with your Q. Some cool tricks you can do to try to bait the enemy team to try to waste abilities on you, and then you can W on them and win the trade. I have some videos on Aurelion Sol as well. I think they're mainly on skill cap though. Azir, way too hard of a champion in lower Marsh. I do think he deserves his C tier at least, but because he is very, very strong, but it's the hardest champion in the game in my opinion. So Brand, tempted to put Brand in S tier to be honest. I think I'm gonna put him in S tier counter pick. So that's what this tier is for. This tier is for counter picks. You're not gonna be able to blind pick these champions, but if you see the enemy mid laner or the enemy team composition, this is where this is a counter to the enemy laner. This is a counter to the enemy team composition. But I would take Brand if I see that I'm against the melee champion. Brand does extremely well against melee champions. If you want to know more about how to play Brand, I do have some videos on him as well, and I'm about to make a guide on him. So Cassiopeia, too hard. Same problem as Azir. Way too hard mechanically. I can't even play Cassiopeia properly. How are you supposed to play Cassiopeia properly, right? Cho'Gath, I think he might be A tier, to be honest. Mostly because players don't have very good movement at lower MMRs, and he's very difficult to push out of lane. And his Q is very easy to hit. It's very straightforward what Cho'Gath should do, and he's very hard to deal with as a champion because of the passive he has, the sustain he gets from just pushing the wave. And you can get him down into a very, very simple form of playing. I Q the wave, and then I leave and try to roam. Or I Q the enemy laner, and I try to flash on them and one-shot them. I think he can play quite simply, and he scales pretty well as well, especially when you get Demonic Embrace and you get around 150 AP from just having one item. It's pretty good. Corki. I think Corki takes the same place as Azir. He's pretty hard to get through laning phase, although if you are good, you can make it happen. And if the enemy laner doesn't punish you properly, you can make that happen for sure. But navigating him in fights is pretty difficult as well. Poke Corki is a little bit simpler. So Poke Corki is why he lands in C tier, otherwise he would be down in D tier. But auto attack Corki is pretty difficult to play, especially at lower MMRs. And he scales too slowly. He's so slow. He doesn't do anything in lane, and then he gets 3 items, and now he's finally online. And you have to pray that your bot lane isn't just dead 20 times already, and you have to deal with a Draven that has 8 items because he sold his trinket slot for an extra IE. Like, it's not happening. It really isn't happening, man. It really isn't happening. Diana. I think Diana at lower Mars is A tier. She's very difficult to deal with properly. She has a bunch of damage, straightforward. She's decent at team fighting because the way to beat her is coordination and locking off flanks against her, which isn't going to happen at lower MMRs. In laning phase, the way to beat her is to punish her cooldowns and be okay with taking damage against her when she has wasted her Q or if she misses her Q, but her Q can be very tricky to dodge. And she's pretty difficult to push out of lane, to be honest. She's quite tanky. Echo. It's either A tier or it's B tier. I think I'm gonna put him in B tier, mostly just because he can be a little bit hard to get through early game. But once you get level 9, you're just gonna one-shot every wave. He's also pretty hard to play in team fight, I suppose. You have to look for good flank angles, and you have to play the mid-game quite well. So he's pretty hard to play. But he is very strong, and he's very hard to get out of lane because the players you're playing against are not very skilled, so that means you're not going to get punished as hard early game, which means that you can maybe scale a little bit more easily. And Echo does turn into an absolute menace once he gets items. Hello everyone, if you enjoy the content, please make sure to subscribe, it helps me out a lot, and please do leave a like as well, and comment whatever you want to see me do next, or if you have any thoughts on the video. Also, if you want to get coaching from me, feel free to check out the description below. You can just add me on Discord and message me and we can figure something out. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy the videos and have a good one. See ya. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Fizz. I think Fizz probably goes into the B tier. Actually, maybe he's A tier, just because he's pretty hard to play against. The way he plays is not that complicated either. It's like, I take a big trade with the enemy, or so I do nothing till level 3. Then I take a big trade with the enemy, I drop them to 50% health, I drop to 50% health, and then I one-shot them. And if you can just optimize not taking damage pre-level 3 as Fizz, you're gonna be doing great. And you're just gonna get level 6 and you're gonna one-shot the enemy laner. Probably even S tier as a counter pick or situationally broken. Mostly because if you end up against a tankier champion in the mid lane or a melee champion, Fizz can struggle quite a lot, but against control mages, you should really be able to kill them at this level. Galio. I hate Galio, man. I absolutely hate Galio. I don't want to put him anywhere good, man. I absolutely hate him. I don't think at lower MMRs that you should be like, hey, let me get my teammates ahead. Let me make sure that my teammates carry me by giving them an advantage. I don't think you should do that. I hate that style of play, especially for lower MMRs. Because again, little Timmy, who's just coming home from school, who just finished having math in the 4th grade, learning about Pythagoras' theorem, is gonna come online, he's gonna lock in Draven, he's gonna just run down bot lane, and he's just gonna permanently fistfight, and either he goes 0-10 or 10-0. And now you have to rely on this guy to be able to carry you in teamfights, because Galio doesn't have the damage necessary to carry teamfights on his own. I would much prefer just playing a champion that can actually carry teamfights with resources. I think it's a lot better. So that's why I'm going to put Galio in probably just B tier. He is still very good. I just don't think you should be playing him to get better at the game. Or if you want to actually feel like you have control over the result of the game. Heimerdinger, I don't know if I can give an honest opinion on him. I think he's situationally broken. Either that or he's down in B tier. I think B tier, but if you pick him against the control mage, he goes down into C tier. His base damages are just quite low, but people don't know quite how to beat him. Irelia. Don't play Irelia at lower levels. Do not do it. I promise you, you're not Irelia King. You're not Chovy. You're not Faker. You're gonna, okay, so you know what's gonna happen when you play Irelia, and you know what happens when anyone that doesn't have discipline plays Irelia? You see the wave. It's freezing. Oh my god, this is the best spot for Irelia. I can force an extended trade with the enemy laner. But the demon in your head says, press Q. And now you're like, oh wait, I could also just get dopamine in my brain by pressing Q on every single minion, because it looks so cool when I fly across the entire lane. And now you've just ruined your freeze, and you're not gonna be able to force a trade with the enemy laner now, and now you're just useless because you have to win lane phase. That was what Irelia has to do because she becomes useless in teamfights. Don't pick her! Jace at lower levels, either he falls into C or into B tier. This champion is quite difficult to play. You have to, well, quite difficult. By that I mean you have to learn his combos properly, and you have to space properly on him as well, which can be pretty difficult at lower MMRs. I think I'm just going to place him in the C tier. He does scale very well, and the enemy champions aren't going to be able to dodge your Qs very well during the later stages, but you need to get to 3 items to really become a menace on Jace, and I don't know if lower MMR player can do that consistently at least. Karthus, even at lower MMRs, I think Karthus slots very well into the A tier. The only problem is you have to be able to land Qs on him, but fret not. If you're mechanically trash like I am, you don't aim for Qs on the enemy laner. You just push out the wave and you become a scaling control mage and you just play 10 CS per minute and you impact the map with your ult. And then you get 3 items and you start one-shotting everyone. The only thing you have to be aware of is when Ludens is better than Liandry's and when you need to go Hourglass or straight damage. That's the only thing you really need to be aware of. Ludens is for when the enemy team is squishier and when you want to play burst fights, when your job is to burst the enemy team quickly and fights are going to be over very quickly. And Liandry's are going to be for when fights are going to be a little bit longer. Teams are usually a little bit tankier at this point. But Liandry's is overall more damage and Ludens is more burst. So if fights are going to be played out in like 3, 4, 5 seconds, Ludens is a lot better. This is a thing for every mage, by the way. Every mage that can go both of those items, I suppose. Karma. I think Karma can be situationally broken, especially at lower MMRs, because the way she plays lane is again very, very simple. You Q the wave, and she's very strong in lane as well. You Q the wave, and then you roam. You don't really have to interact with the enemy laner. She kind of functions a bit like a Galio, except she has a little bit more damage in the lane, and she has a little bit stronger of a laning phase, and she can also carry team fights because of her mantra Q. She does quite a lot of damage. You can opt to build supportive on her, or you can go something like a Liandry's if you actually want to be a damage threat. That's what I would do at lower MMRs, but yeah, absolutely. Play Karma. She's good. Kassadin. I think Kassadin is an S tier counter pick. I don't think you should blind pick him at lower MMRs. Maybe actually he can go into just the straight up S tier. The only concern I have is what if you end up running into like a Tristana or something like that. But at worst case, then you can dodge. Tristana is really Kassadin's worst matchup. You're not going to be able to play it. Don't even try. Just dodge it. It's going to give you a lot more success. But Kassadin is really, really strong, especially after the scaling nerfs. Not the scaling nerfs, the snowball nerfs, and after the Doran's buffs. His Doran's shield is very nice now, and you're not going to get harassed as much during the laning phase. So you're going to be able to get to your level 6 without getting harassed as much. The only thing you really have to learn on Kassadin is how can I make sure that I don't lose a lot of HP early. Usually the tricks are when the enemy has the last hit, you walk up to last hit as well. Last hitting with your E to try to like E and hit the enemy laner at the same time while you last hit minions. Giving up minions as well is a very important thing to learn on Kassadin, and making sure your wave doesn't ever get stuck in a freeze where you can get ganked. Those are kind of like the 4 things you have to learn how to do on Kassadin to be successful on him. But after that, he becomes very straightforward. But yeah, if you do want to learn how to do that, I also offer coaching. So message me on Discord, it's just Shori, and reach out to me and we can figure something out. Katarina. D tier. She's very difficult to play. I can't play Katarina, and I'm very high elo. She doesn't teach you anything important that you need to know about the game, so you're not going to be able to climb that well on her. Maybe Katarina just really clicks with your brain, but it's going to be very rare. I would not recommend playing her in lower MMRs. Absolutely not. Unless you just really enjoy her. Kayle. I think Kayle has a little bit more merit at lower MMRs because she's not going to get punished in lane quite as much. Once she gets level 6, she can kind of start carrying, or kind of start just playing normally in the lane. And then she becomes a very big threat on 2 to 3 items when she gets level 11 and when she gets level 16. So I think she has a little bit merit than at higher MMRs. At higher MMRs, I would place her in D tier because her lane is just so weak. But like I said, at lower MMRs, it's very difficult for people to properly punish your laning phase. LeBlanc, I think LeBlanc is D tier. She has to do too much that even at higher elos, she can't do, so imagine at lower elos. Although I will say, people are not going to properly know how to play around LeBlanc's cooldowns. The main thing I see when I hear that people are struggling against LeBlanc when I'm doing coaching sessions is LeBlanc will QW them, and then they'll get scared and walk away. When in reality, they should walk in and trade back with the LeBlanc, because LeBlanc has just wasted her two biggest cooldowns, right? Her Q and her W. Her W has a very long cooldown early. So that way, LeBlanc kind of gets to whittle down the enemy laner. But I think LeBlanc's damage is just too low, and it's so hard to carry on her in team fights unless you're very, very good. So I think she goes into D tier. If you struggle with dealing with LeBlanc in lane, make sure that you're not doing that. That being not trading back with her when she's wasting her cooldowns on you. It's a very important concept. Lissandra, situationally broken. It's not a counter pick necessarily. It's a team compositional counter. If you can get against the team composition that mainly focuses on diving in, then Lissandra is a very, very good pick. Short range champions, assassins, she's very good against those. So then I would definitely pick Lissandra, and I would say she's situationally broken. She's very simple as well. She's not too difficult to play. Lux. Might actually just put Lux in S tier. Either Lux goes in S tier or she goes in A tier, and I'm not quite sure which one. At higher elos, Lux isn't great because her cooldowns are very, very long, but she still scales very well. She would probably be an S tier counter pick at higher levels, but at lower MMRs, it's very difficult for people to punish her properly, and she scales extremely well and becomes extremely obnoxious. The only problem I have with her is she has 4 skill shots. That makes her pretty difficult, because if you miss one of those skill shots, well, I suppose her W doesn't really count, but if you miss one of her other 3 skill shots, she just does so much less damage. Malphite. Malphite situationally broken. Pick him into AD assassins if the enemy has a lot of AD on their team, especially if they're full AD. Even if their support is AP, you can still pick him, or if they have like an AP top laner. If they have an AD assassin mid lane and an AD assassin or something like that jungle, pick Malphite. He's absolutely broken. You're gonna 1v9 the game. He's very simple to play as well. Please, more people, play Malphite mid! He's broken! Malzahar. I'm sure we all know where this is gonna land. He's just S tier. He's very straightforward to play. You push the wave, you start Sapphire Crystal, you go Futures Market, you find a base, you get your Lost Chapter, and then you just start one-shotting the wave. Make sure that you are standing far enough back when it comes to pushing out the wave without getting harassed by the enemy laner during the early stages. But just push out the wave, and then you can move to either side lane for a roam with your ult, and you're gonna make a lot of stuff happen. Nerfari. Either she's an S tier counter pick, or she's an A tier champion. And I think she's honestly closer to being an A tier champion. Mostly just because, although if she can get through laning phase, she is very obnoxious. I think she's an S tier counter pick. Pick her into melee AP assassins, and you're gonna do so well. She just beats them all with her Q. She does so much damage to them. Against control mages, she can struggle a little bit in lane, but once you get out of lane against control mages, especially at lower MMRs, you're definitely going to be able to make some magic happen. I think she's an S tier counter pick. Neeko, probably just an A tier champion. She's very straightforward, very simple in what she wants to do. She has a very cool mechanic in that she can turn into a minion, which is extremely fun to play with, and it is extremely weird for an enemy team to deal with because they have to keep track of you at all times, which isn't very common in lower MMRs. People aren't going to count minions properly. The way she plays lane is pretty straightforward. You just spam Q on the enemy laner, and then you push them in, and then you go for roams to either of the side lanes. And then you can go for an all-in if you get them low enough. Orianna, my favorite champion of all time. I would like to put her into S tier, but I don't think she's as simple as these other champions in terms of how much of a payoff you would get from playing her. I think if you play the style of Orianna that either does W max or 3 points into W, which is more resemblant of a burst mage champion instead of a DPS mage style of champion, she can probably go into the A tier because that's a pretty straightforward style to play, and it's a style that's very effective against all champions. If you play Q-Max non-stop, she probably is a B tier champion because then she struggles a little bit more into control mages. But I'm gonna put her into an A tier. Qiyana, Qiyana, Qiyana. I don't know where to place her. At lower MMRs, she's not going to get punished properly in lane, and she's going to be able to get to her items for free, in which case she is very, very strong, and she can one-shot you very, very easily. But the Qiyana has to be capable of finding those angles, which I just don't think that she's going to be when she's like a silver player on Qiyana, for example. I don't think she's going to be able to find the most optimal angles to find the enemy backline. But I also do think the enemy laners playing against Qiyana are going to be very confused when they magically get one shot from 80% health. Ryze, way too difficult of a champion, not really worth the reward that you get for playing him well, I don't think. He is good against some of these champions. He's good against Nefari, I would have to imagine. He's okay against some of these champions here as well. Fizz, Diana, he's pretty good against. Ahri, he's good against. But he's not very good against any of these champions up here in the S tier, which I think means that there's no way he's going to be placed in S tier. And also, I think he's just way too difficult for lower MMR players to deal with. He is more simple than he used to be, but he's still very difficult to play properly. You have to combo him, you have to space on him, and you have to know what to do with the wave properly, which I just don't think lower MMR players can all at once. Seraphine. I think here we actually get our next S tier pick. Or situationally broken. I think Seraphine at lower MMRs is super, super strong. Now, there are some matchups she really struggles with. Those matchups are Zed, Akali, Sylas, Kassadin, Nefari even. These types of champions she really struggles with because they're champions that can get on her very easily. Think about it like this. If the champion can get on Seraphine very easily, she probably struggles with laning against them. But any other champion, a control mage, a long range mage, anything like that, she does pretty well against. She just gets to push out the wave and just scale. And Seraphine becomes very obnoxious once she gets items. She becomes extremely high damage, and she gets a lot of utility with her W as well. I would put her into the S tier. All you need to know is how to navigate all you need to know is how to navigate the laning phase on her, and then you get into team fights with her with Liandry's and double Qs, and you're going to be dealing so much damage. You kind of just need to know that you can push every single wave when you start getting against control mages. And then she becomes broken. Swain, I think, just like in my other video, situationally broken. He's very good against short-range team compositions that don't have a lot of DPS, and he's also a pretty straightforward champion to play. You can play Rylai's first on him, or you can go Rod of Aegis. A lot of options. You can go tanky on him, you can go more damage on him. He has a lot of options. I'd highly recommend looking into him if you enjoy him. He can definitely be played, just situationally broken, right? Sylas. At lower MMRs, I think I play Sylas in C tier. He's just way too difficult to play properly. He can get through lane quite easily, but again, you have to be very confident on Sylas when it comes to actually playing fights during the mid game, and he's very difficult to maneuver in that regard. His laning is actually the easiest part of him, but is the advantage that you get in lane going to be big enough to outweigh how difficult he is to play in fights, as opposed to something like a Seraphine, where you literally just have to press EQ Alt W and that's it, or an Annie, where you just put down your bear and call it a day, right? Sylas, you have to fucking, oh, let me E to the side to dodge this skill shot, fire down my Q, E on top of them, W, steal an ult over here, oh, my E is up again, let me dash back here, oh, find a good angle for my ult, and I have to know how every single ult in the game works, right? Whereas Annie is just, la da 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 da, bear, call it a day, right? Like, this champion is very difficult to play properly, so I don't think that you should be aiming to play him, unless it's like you have a very good game for him. Syndra, much like Orianna, probably goes into the A tier. She's a little bit more difficult than something like a Seraphine to play, because you have to space very well on her, and you have to be able to aim your balls quite well on her. Much like Orianna, right? It's all about playing with balls with these two champions. And if you're not good at playing with balls, then you're not going to be able to land your big abilities and deal a lot of damage. However, they are very strong once you start getting the feeling for them. And that can also just resort back to playing more of a I'm going to push you in type of style, instead of I'm going to try to kill the enemy laner type of style. But invest like 10 to 20 games in them, and you should be feeling somewhat competent and confident with them, in which case they become very strong champions. Just not quite as simple as Seraphine for the reward that you get. Taliyah, again, I think she's situationally broken. Lower MMRs can definitely try to play Taliyah. She's pretty straightforward. She is a little bit simpler than these two champions as well, than Orianna and Syndra. She's just a little bit weaker in the lane, but she basically just pushes the wave and then goes for roams. EWQ is the only combo you really have to know. The only part of her that's very complicated is her ult and how to angle that, but honestly, I think if you play against a team comp that has a lot of dashes, you usually don't even have to find a good ult. You just play her like a regular control mage, which is just put down your E in fights and call it a day. Talon. I think with the Ghostblade buffs, maybe he can fit into B tier, especially at lower MMRs, where you can just push the wave and roam on him, and he can make a lot of chaos happen on the map. If you play against a coordinated team, which you're not going to in solo queue at all, especially not at the lower end of the ladder, he's bad. But I think there's so much chaos in solo queue that much like Qiyana, he probably just slots straight into the B tier. Tristana, S tier counter pick. This champion is pretty straightforward to play. She is an ADC champion, which means that you have to know how to kite on her properly. But she's very difficult to deal with for lower MMR players because she just jumps on you, and now what do? She wins the trade, she just jumps on you and auto attacks you and procs her bomb. How can I win, right? That's how it feels playing against her. In reality, you have to slowly whittle her down and play properly with the wave. The enemy has to be pretty good to know how to deal with Tristana. The only problem with Tristana is, well, you can get ganked very easily, and if the enemy team locks in Malphite against you and you're playing full AD, you know, it's a little bit tough. Plus, I think it's pretty hard to play Tristana against something like a Syndra or something like a Talia, something like a Malzahar. Seraphine shouldn't be too hard, but it's also difficult to play Tristana against something like an Annie. Champions where if you jump on them, they are just gonna boom CC you immediately and you're gonna lose half of your health. I think it's pretty difficult to play Tristana into those champions. Twisted Fate. Either he goes into C tier or he goes into D tier. Just because, again, he turns into more of a utility champion than he does into a damage carry threat, and he carries through roaming. But he does have some pretty nice setup for his ganks, and he does have a pretty good ability to roam. But if I placed Ryze in D tier, it's only fair that I placed TF as well. Although TF is simpler to play than Ryze, I think. Yeah, I don't think Twisted Fate is difficult enough to warrant putting him in D tier. Right now, when I'm looking at my D tier, it's a lot of champions that are very, very difficult to play. And just lower MMR players aren't going to get enough out of them. So I think Twisted Fate isn't quite that difficult to play. So I think lower MMR players can get more out of him than they can out of a Ryze or LeBlanc or something like that. Plus, he doesn't need to be the carry. So you don't need to play team fights perfectly on him, unlike these champions down here. I think you can make some mistakes on Twisted Fate and still be fine. So I think he's going to be put in C tier. Tryndamere, S tier counter pick. Tryndamere mid lane, extremely good, especially at lower levels, because people do not know how to deal with him. They do not know what to do. People at lower levels do not know what to do against him. If you're playing against a control mage, it might get a little bit dodgy, a little bit difficult, because you're going to get whittled out and you're going to get poked out, and you might not be comfortable playing below 30% health on him because you can get one shot. But I promise you, play some games on Tryndamere, get a feel for how he plays, flash Ghost, and try to dive the enemy laner at level 6, level 7. And you're gonna see, you're just gonna one-shot them on their tower, they're gonna have no counterplay, and they're gonna be like, huh, what just happened? And then you become Tryndamere, who scales very well as well. Veigar. At lower MMRs, I think Veigar is not gonna get punished enough in lane to warrant him being D tier. His items are still not great, but I think people really struggle with understanding how to beat Veigar, especially in team fights. I always hear people think that Veigar is extremely broken at lower levels, when in reality, he's very weak right now. But the way you can play Veigar is just sit back and scale. You don't have to do anything proactively, and then you have a big-ass cage that you just trap people inside of, and they can't dodge your spells inside of it. So I think Veigar probably slots into B tier. Despite the fact that he's in a very weak state, and despite the fact that he has no good items. Vel'Koz. I think Vel'Koz is too difficult to play for lower MMR players for the reward you get. Just play Seraphine, just play Annie, just play Aurelion Sol if you want to play something like that. If you want to play a burst mage or a longer range mage, you can play Syndra as well. Or Seraphine. You're gonna get better results than Vel'Koz. Vel'Koz, you need to have like a PhD in physics on top of like a master's degree in quantum science, neurological understanding of human behavior to know how they're gonna think and dodge. Like, you need a master's in neuroscience and you need a PhD in physics and quantum physics. I don't have that. I dropped out of my second year of psychology. How am I supposed to do that, bro? Vex. I think Vex at lower MMRs is probably S tier. She is very obnoxious to play against. She's very difficult to play against. The main way you beat her is by punishing her cooldowns, walking up to her and trying to bait out her E and then punish her when her E is on cooldown. But it's a very complicated style that you have to play to be able to beat her, especially in the laning phase. And then during the mid game, she becomes very obnoxious with her ult, is what I have noticed people feeling. Against tanks, she's pretty bad. So make sure that you don't pick her into a game where the enemy, for example, has 3 tanks, because you're going to feel very, very useful. Vex can switch between playing as a control mage and as an assassin as well, depending on how the enemy team is positioning. Once she finds access to the backline, she can immediately switch into the style of an assassin, and until then, she can play the fight a little bit slower and just play as a control mage, where you fire out spells, back off, fire out spells, back off, and then boom, the enemy's low enough, engage, go. Viktor! I think Viktor's probably a little bit too hard to play, but I don't think he's all the way down here because he gets, like, his skill floor is decently high. It's just hard to aim his E, control his ult, place a good W, Q and animation cancel the Q while you kite properly. It's hard to do all of these things at once, and that's what you have to do to get the most out of Viktor. But even if you don't do it and you just sit back and be like, I'm gonna throw E, I'm gonna put my ult, you're still gonna get enough out of him for him to be useful. The only issue is just you have to play very high CS per minute on him, and you have to put all resources onto yourself and carry the game. And he just doesn't give you the same carry potential as something like a Syndra or an Orianna, in my opinion. Vladimir, his champion sucks, man. His champion is so bad. All the matchups up here suck for Vladimir, except for Aurelion Sol, maybe. I don't know, man. You have to know how to do your combo as well very quickly. He is difficult to punish in lane, I suppose, but he's just so weak at trading, you're not gonna do anything. Maybe he can go into B tier, but I think, honestly, D tier. He's so bad right now. Xerath. At lower levels, Xerath is probably pretty difficult to maneuver, I'm gonna be honest. You can just sit back and fire spells, but at that point, just play Lux instead. She's just a simpler version of Xerath that gets almost the same results. Just play Lux instead. Yasuo. I'm very conflicted about this one, because some Yasuos I've seen at lower MMRs play like absolute schizos, which is the correct way to play him, and some Yasuos just play a little bit too much like a schizo and take really bad trades and just die level 2 for no reason. So I'm very conflicted. Either he's going very high up because people don't know how to deal with him properly, or he's going very far down because he just randomly decides to go 0-10, and I can't figure out which one. I think I'm just gonna settle in between and put him in B tier, but he's such a coin flip. Because if you know how to deal with Yasuo, he's gonna go 0-10. If your jungler is mid lane, he's gonna go 0-10. He has no forms of consistency whatsoever, but if you know how to play Yasuo properly and not go 0-10 and play around the jungler, he's a very, very obnoxious champion. But if you know how to play Yasuo properly and how to not get ganked and go 0-10, you probably wouldn't be in gold. Yone. Yone is a very strong champion at the moment. He's a little bit difficult to play, but he's a lot simpler than something like a Yasuo, and he is also stronger, in my opinion, so I think he just slots very well into the A tier. Zed. Zed has been nerfed recently, so I think he just goes into the B tier. He was A tier before, and now he just drops down into B tier because his Shadow has a longer cooldown, and the Snowball nerfs were a little bit rough on him. Ziggs. We might get another S tier pick here. Ziggs is very simple to play. You throw bombs, and especially after the buffs, is he very easy to land harass with in lane. The only problem is just you have to know how to deal with champions that are shorter range, assassiny, and can jump on you. But I think Ziggs is very, very good, especially at lower levels. Especially because people at lower MMRs, below Diamond actually, love to just randomly roam somewhere. In which case Ziggs will take your entire tower if you randomly roam anywhere and you don't make a good thing happen out of it. You will lose your mid lane tower. So I think Ziggs can probably slot into the A tier. Or S tier probably. Zoe, don't play Zoe. C tier, a little bit easier than all of these champions in terms of the reward that you get for playing her. It's like a reward against difficulty curve that I'm basically trying to make here. I think Zoe is a little bit simpler to play at lower MMRs because you just land an E on her, or you land an E and then you go for a big trade, whereas Xerath you have to like space properly and all that stuff. Zoe, you press R, bubble. Did the bubble hit? Nice, I take 60% of your health. Did bubble not hit? Okay, I lose 20% of my health and I run away and wait. I think that's it for the tier list. I think I got every single champion. If I missed out on any champions, please do let me know in the comments below and let me know what you think. Should I do more of these tier lists? Should I make one that's for improving? I might actually take all the champions that I put up into the S tier here and try to make videos on them to showcase how to play them specifically. So you guys have like some form of reference of how you should think on those champions. Let me know if you want to see that or if there's anything else you want to see. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed and have a good one. See ya. Bye bye. Bye bye.